Yeah, but I will say just to close the chapter on that, I really hope for your sake that he pans out because if you fail
Oh,
with Jalen Polk and Jayden Higgins in 2 years in a row, no one's going to take your wide receiver evaluation seriously anymore, Ricky.
I'm not sure they do anyways, Edgar. So just that's okay, man. If that's the position that I just can't hit, then that's the one.
Welcome to the Draft Crush Show. My name is Edgar Salmingo Jr., joined always by Ricky Raines. Ricky, how are you?
I'm doing well, Edgar. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good. It is an awesome day anytime we get to talk NFL draft. So
Yes,
thanks for
sir.
doing this again.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. We got something special today, right?
Yeah, today we are going to talk about. We just had a Senior Bowl, so whatever you're watching this, whatever time, day, whatever you're watching this, we've just concluded a week or so of practices for the Senior Bowl, and so Ricky and I got together, talked about the name of the show, Draft Crush. Like, who are our draft crushes? Who's emerging? Maybe they were already draft crushes, right, Ricky, before the
Yeah.
Senior Bowl, but maybe how they performed, how the buzz is going. Um, how the feeling is and people are rising up draft boards, so to speak. We want to talk about each of us, our three favorite draft crushes post Senior Bowl, or the people who participate in the Senior Bowl.
Right. And so for me, when you brought it up, there was already a couple of my draft crushes from the draft were participants at the Senior Bowl. And luckily, the guys that I liked going in, they only helped their case for me, right? Like I liked what I saw from them. The Senior Bowl is a really cool thing because you get to look at these prospects do the one-on-one drills. You get to see them play with new teammates in a quick setting. See how quickly they take to the coaching. The one-on-one drills, I think it is important to note, they do tilt a little bit one side, right? They are set up when you watch these cornerback versus or defensive back versus wide receiver and tight end drills. Man, that's a tough ask on those defensive backs, right? It's a
Yep.
really tough cover. So when you see a really good rep from that, I always make a little asterisk on my notes and I'm like, that's a nice rep. And on the same way on the defensive line, offensive line, if I see a really nice rep by an offensive lineman, I know that that's not set up for him to succeed typically. So when I see it, I'm like, okay, that's important. I'm going to go back and I'm going to remember that he had a good rep, see if I can find that duplicated multiple times on the game film. And I start to form a little bit of a pattern. So I really enjoy the Senior Bowl, man, and I'm looking forward to talking about who our draft crushes are from the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, me too. I know there's a lot of controversy, like you mentioned, Ricky, about like should these things count? Like or it's. But the one thing that I really appreciate is it's a central environment where people are going up one on one, and so we'll talk about this for some of my draft crushes for sure. But maybe they haven't played against the highest competition, and so this will be the first time for a lot of these players. You're seeing them head to head against um, a level higher or tier higher than the teams that they usually play. And so some people have question marks like, oh, this player is good, but level of competition. And so this is a great environment to say, like, hey, are they legit or was it just because they're beating up on people who are not even going to make the NFL?
Yeah, that's a great point, and we will. We have multiple people that we'll talk about that fit that parameter. And you mentioned it too that like this is a place to see everyone in a like level playing field essentially, right? Like it's the
Mhm.
same coaches, it's the same directions. And you mentioned how much stock do you put in? Should you put stock into the performances of individual drills and things like that from the Senior Bowl? I don't think that you form an opinion at the Senior Bowl, right? But
Mhm.
I think that you can either bolster it or it can open up questions again that you maybe aren't sure were answered the first time, and maybe it gave you a little bit more reasoning to believe your slight first initial impression of a player. Like I know that we have a couple guys, so maybe we just jump into this and we could kind of answer those questions while we're doing it. How does that sound?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So we're going to start off with Edgar Salmingo Jr.'s first Senior Bowl draft crush. Edgar, tell me about this large fella.
So Darius Alexander, okay. So what you mentioned, Ricky, just right now is like, hey, there are some players that, maybe you don't form an opinion just based on the Senior Bowl, but there are
Right.
players that you look at and you're like, dude, I should watch more tape on this guy. So I doubt that very many casual, semi-casual draft fans like us are like constantly pouring over Toledo all 22 film, yeah. Just for
Yeah.
fun, right? But someone like Darius Alexander, someone that's a draft crush. One thing we haven't said is like, definition of a draft crush for me, and we could have different definitions. For me, is like someone who is on the periphery. Like I can't say Abdul Carter is a draft crush because he's already slated to go in the top whatever, right? Or last year,
Everybody
Caleb
likes
Williams,
Abdul. Yeah.
or last year, Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. is my draft crush. Granted, like you could like them, you could be a fan. I'm not against that. Like, but for me, a definition of a crush is like who's someone's on the periphery, who's someone's on the outside, or in turn, who's somebody that's ranked like maybe lower by consensus, and you have them a little bit higher than everybody else. So I know maybe we're gonna bring this up every show, Ricky, but we'll bring up Jaylen Polk as an example of model draft crush as someone that fits that description.
No, I think that's it though, right? Because you mentioned it in this draft. You've got, I'd say, maybe 3 to 4, maybe 5 blue chip type prospects. It's pretty easy to agree that those are good prospects and that there's a whole lot of reasons to like them. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about them, and they would fit on just about any team, if not any team. So, like, it's not hard to have a draft crush on those guys, right? But some
Yep.
of these other guys that you hear talked about, oh, this is such a bad wide receiver class or something like that. And maybe you find yourself just drawn to one of these receivers. Like, are you sure this is bad? Because this guy looks like a ball player.
Yeah.
These defensive linemen, it's a great example. I love Darius Alexander. And for the Senior Bowl, I think he's a perfect example, man. He
Mhm.
really probably earned himself some money at this All-Star game.
And so one thing that I love, Ricky, and the reason why I picked the guys that I picked, Darius Alexander like looks like an NFL player. So sometimes
Yeah.
in the early goings of draft season, Ricky, you just see height and weight, right? But nobody knows how that height and weight is distributed. They could be
Yep.
skinny, they could be bigger in their lower half, as Mike Mayock could say, they can have a bubble butt
Yeah.
kind of physique, and all those are fine. But like you want to really look at somebody and just see like, do they look like do they even just walk into the room and like, okay, that's an NFL player? Because
Yep.
sometimes people have preconceptions of how people are. And so just because you have, I'm sure everyone who's played organized sports or watched their child or watched somebody play organized sports, just because somebody looks like they get off the bus and they look like, they can play, how they perform on the field, how they shoot a ball, how they catch a pass, and be completely different based on walking off the bus. Yeah.
That's
Darius
right.
Alexander not only looks like an NFL player, but he performed at the Senior Bowl practices like an NFL player. So some of the stats here we got 6'4, 304 pounds, 10-inch hands. And then the big part, especially for some teams who have thresholds for physical, we talked about this in our first episode, 34-inch arms and an 83-inch, close to an 83-inch wingspan. Now, that's a massive human being, right?
Yeah.
And so think about, and um, as we go through this, and we'll probably overlay some clips of some of his wins at the Senior Bowl practices, but obviously there's some caution, as Ricky said, there could be um, they're in a position where offensive linemen are, I want to say set up to fail, but they're set up with a disadvantage. But how they win really tells me a lot. And for me, his speed and his power, how he used his length was very, very key to me. I also think that like, on the interior, there is a, there is a minimum size requirement you need to be able to hold up against the run and or like be able to rush the passer. And I think he has the speed to rush the passer, the length to rush the passer, but also like just the body to like hold at the point of attack to stop the run. You want to talk about high praise in terms of like his body type? Daniel Jeremiah, in one of his articles after the Senior Bowl practices, said Darius Alexander's body type reminds me of Chiefs All-Pro defensive tackle Chris Jones. And so,
Wow.
I'm not saying he's going to be Chris Jones.
Yeah,
I'm saying he's going to be half of Chris Jones, but you're partly there if you have the body type of a Chris
that's right.
Jones. And so, we talked about this in episode 1. I'm a traitsy guy. I want to see that. And so, because he flashed, because he was able to demonstrate some skill in addition to the ideal size, that's what makes him a draft crush for me.
I love it. That Chris Jones thing, man, that's real too, because Chris Jones, his length is one of his real big, almost like compensators, right?
Mhm.
If he is slightly out of position, he's got extremely long arms and that wingspan to kind of use that strength that he can get his hands on you and hold on tight, and you don't get away from him, man. He's got that grip. So that Darius Alexander even having a similar physical profile to Chris Jones is a wonderful starting point for him. I'm excited to see what he does at the combine with the athletic testing. Some of those like the shuttle drill, bench press, I'd like to see with him to know just like from a strength standpoint. Because with those long arms, a lot of times you see guys with the longer arms and they don't put up as many reps, right, on the bench.
Mhm.
So when you see the guys that do have these really long arm length and then they still put up 25 to 30 reps on the bench, you're like, all right, that dude right there is a beast when it comes to the power game. Darius is probably a very versatile guy along the defensive line too. Really good first pick, Edgar. I like him.
Thank you. So that's mine. Who's your first Senior Bowl draft crush, Ricky?
All right, let's get straight into it. For me, man, I'm diving head first. Jayden Higgins, the wide receiver out of Iowa State. So, Edgar, when you were talking, you say sometimes you can look at them when they get off the bus and they just look like an NFL player, right? One of the things that I've always been drawn to with Jayden Higgins since starting the evaluation process with him is his size and speed combination. You're going to hear a lot of the comp to Nico Collins because I think that their measurables are extremely similar. I'm not sure that they play similar as far as how Jayden is playing in college right now to how Nico played in college, but maybe the comp works more for how Nico is playing in the NFL now that he's kind of found his stride and refined some of the things with the route running that was in question for him. But Jayden Higgins, 6'3" and he looks it, every bit of it. The weight, 217 pounds. They had him listed at 6'4", 215. He came in at 6'3" and 217 pounds. I mean, he looks like he is a not densely built wide receiver, but a well-proportioned and muscular wide receiver. He looks every bit of that 6'4", almost 220 pounds. 9.5-inch hands, really good size hands for a wide receiver. And you see it shows up on tape with the vice grip that he catches with, man. I mean, this guy's got terrific ball skills. No shocker, 33-inch plus arms. I mean, the guy has long arms. He goes up and where he gets that ball at the catch point, that is one of his things, his high point ability. I don't know that he'll test insanely with the athleticism at the combine. No one is mistaking him for a burner necessarily, but I will tell you one thing about Jayden Higgins that I like a lot is that he does move extremely well for a guy his size. Now, I'm showing a couple of the clips right now from the Senior Bowl and a little bit of his college tape. Some of these releases at the line, Edgar, that we saw, and they were hyper criticized, were called TikTok routes, right? Because they were taking 8 to 10 steps off the line of scrimmage before even going on and getting into the stem. So what is your thought kind of on like, how do you evaluate some of these things when it's not that much of an in-game? You can't use that in the NFL, right? You can't take 8 steps at the release before getting off. You're going to get smoked, right? So can you still take something from that though?
I think as an evaluator, you could look at, and we haven't talked about this as a draft eval, is like you can't, or I think you mentioned it last episode, but you really can't evaluate something. You can't. Players are not static, right? Especially if they're younger players. I can't say like, oh, this guy runs his releases 8 steps, and so he runs every like. There are going to be some teams with really great wide receiver rooms or OCs to be like, I need this body type, I need this skill set, and if this is the thing that is preventing him from being successful, like we could fix that. And so I think as an evaluator, you look at this as, is this fixable? If it's fixable, then I shouldn't ding him for it. If it's not fixable, then yeah, I'll ding him for it. But I don't
Yeah.
think some things like this, or some people say, oh, like you said, wasted movement. I think I might
Yep.
value someone who doesn't use wasted movement because that's one less thing that I have to train them on. But if they do it,
Yes.
I don't automatically ding them because it should be, or if it's something that's fixable, I should trust my coaches to be able to do that.
I 100% agree. And I think that's a perfect way to put it. And I kind of was hoping that you would go down that path, Edgar. So thank you very much. Because what I saw with Jayden Higgins, and I've got this clip paused particularly, this is the one where he creates a ton of separation. A guy his size really probably shouldn't be able to move this fluidly and this quickly with this release and create this kind of separation. One thing that I really looked for with Jayden in his tape, what I was looking for here at the Senior Bowl, can he get behind the defenders on the one-on-one? Like, is he going to be that kind of threat, right? When you talk about Nico Collins, so much of his action, he's gotten so good on those slants and those quick routes, but he gets behind defenders and he makes you pay. He's got the kind of speed to break away and turn that into a house call. I wanted to see if Jayden could do it. I thought this release on this particular clip was the most wasted movement that I saw from him all week. And this was not nearly as bad as some of the other guys that I saw, but just his ability to just move right there, get to that outside, and he's gone. Now that defender there did not play terrifically. There was multiple things that he could have done different, but you can see how quickly and how sudden some of his movements are. He's a really good route salesman with his head and his hands. He gets to where he is now. This one is in the Super Bowl or in the Senior Bowl. He caught the touchdown on the double pass from Ollie Gordon, the running back. Made a really nice adjustment, fighting through play or pass interference to make the catch. Really kind of demonstrated everything that I wanted to see. The questions with Jayden Higgins are going to be, what is his speed and what is his yak ability? But I don't have problems with that. Now, you can go back and watch the Cincinnati game in 2023 and the Oklahoma game in that same season. He has a lot of really good after the catch opportunities. His short area quickness, this one right here is a good example. He could make the catch and kind of do a couple of cuts and get by you. He's a little shiftier than you would anticipate. Stops on a dime. He's not going to be confused for Xavier Worthy, but he is absolutely going to offer up, in my opinion, a real red zone threat, a chain mover. And then I think if he can continue to grow into that movement with that body size, I just think that the sky is the limit for a guy like Jayden Higgins, especially in a class that I'm not so sure that there's any wide receivers that everyone is sure is going to be a star at the next level.
I think for me, I know that there's maybe some criticism about his releases or the amount of steps he takes. One thing that I noted when I was watching him is like I really like his footwork for his size. And so one thing that
Yep.
we haven't touched on is like if you're a really big human, like someone like Jayden Higgins or Ted McMillan, there's like extra force and effort you have to exert yourself
That's
to
right.
change directions or stop or slow down and stop. If you're a smaller player, it's a little bit easier. And so like you kind of have to, if you're a small player, you almost like to say you have to have this. And if you're a bigger player, it's like a bonus if you have good footwork. And so one thing I noticed when I watched him, maybe it's not perfect all the time, maybe consistency isn't there, but like of the clips you showed, Ricky, like some of those like very quick cuts and how he uses his feet, I think is something that like really impressed me for his size.
Yeah, he can get out of his break pretty quickly. Maybe the release off the line of scrimmage, that's still going to need some tailoring. But, in the NFL, I see that a lot, right? Like that's
Mhm,
not necessarily, that's a teachable thing. And you said it earlier. Can this guy get better at this by coaching? Can he learn this?
mhm,
Or is this something that like I'm going to have to break him of and then teach
mhm,
him the right way? I don't see
mhm,
that with Jayden Higgins. Jayden Higgins has a lot of really good habits. And he has a lot of good natural ability. There's also a guy that transferred from a smaller school. He's been at Iowa State for 2 years. The offense in 2023 was a little bit more vertical than it was this past season. Jaylen Noel is his counterpart. Maybe he even pops up at some point in this episode. But that's the thing that you watch the way that they play on offense at Iowa State. They didn't ask him to get behind the defense a whole lot this year. Now,
mhm,
last year, he had large gains of like 75 yards, I think was his longest catch, and that was against Cincinnati in the game that's showing here. He can do it. It's just what are
mhm.
they asking you to do? The release off the line, yeah, that can improve, but he's very quick and fluid out of his breaks, and I think that that's a translatable skill at the NFL.
Mm.
All right, so that's
I
my first pick for the draft crush of
yeah,
the Senior Bowl. You ready to get into
I will
your
s
next one?
yeah, but I will say just to close the chapter on that, I really hope for your sake that he pans out because if you fail with
Oh,
Jalen Polk and Jayden Higgins in 2 years in a row, no one's going to take your wide receiver evaluation seriously anymore, Ricky.
I'm not sure they do anyways, Edgar. So like just that's okay, man. If that's the position that I just can't hit, then that's the one. To be fair though, I was really high on Xavier Worthy. I really liked him a whole lot. I don't know. Yeah,
Don't
maybe
don't curse him too, Ricky. Let him breathe.
what's gonna happen if he's like a difference maker in the Super Bowl though? Like then do I get to tip my hat a little bit?
To be honest, like that was the first draft crush I heard. I forgot all, but the first one I remember was Xavier Worthy before Jalen Polk.
He was, yeah. I didn't really get into Jaylen Polk until I started watching the tape, and he played like a madman. But Xavier
Yeah.
Worthy was the one that caught my eye immediately.
So if Xavier Worthy becomes Super Bowl MVP, you could retire and say you're the best draft evaluator in the world.
We might only have like a 3-episode run of Draft Crush, and I might just be out.
So my second one. So I thought about this, and I know Ricky just mentioned it, but I went with Jaylin Noel, the wide receiver out of Iowa State, the counterpart to Jayden Higgins. Just looking at some of his measurables, his height a little bit under 6 foot, weight 196, 8.5-inch hands, 30-inch arm length, and a 72-inch wingspan. So Jaylin Noel, why is he my draft crush? What do I like about him? Well, if I looked at the tape and I watch it, I know it's controversial, so I'm not gonna. I don't take this lightly, and don't grill me for this, Ricky. But sometimes you see a smaller wide receiver that's a little bigger frame that plays like a dog or a feisty person, and you just automatically get Steve Smith vibes, And so, not saying he's Steve Smith or he's even touching Steve Smith, but just like every time I see a smaller, feistier bulldog wide receiver, I always think of Steve Smith. Doesn't mean they're gonna be Steve Smith, but like I just want to say in that mold of a
Yeah,
like a attacking wide receiver that can play special teams, like that tells me, like it gives me Steve Smith vibes. But don't tell me, I'm not telling you that he's going to be Steve Smith. I'm just saying that that's what it reminds me of, right? And that's something that I'm attracted to because again, as a Panthers fan, Steve Smith is someone I grew up watching through my college years, through adult years. So like I have a fondness for people who like to play or may have similar attributes to Steve Smith. So one thing about him at the Senior Bowl that I really liked from an analytics perspective, maybe I'll drop this in later, but Zebra Sports or Zebra Technology. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Ricky, but
I am. Yeah.
they GPS track these players throughout the practices and
Yep.
everything, and then later they post their scores. Jalen Noel was, I think, number 1 and number 2 in their GPS tracking in acceleration and deceleration.
Mm.
Jordan Rodriguez, who I'm a big fan of, she's a writer for The Athletic, used to write for the Panthers, now writes for the Rams. So he was talking about how the Rams do a lot of research on deceleration for wide receivers. Like that's a very key trait that they're looking for. Like how fast can you decelerate? And so
Yeah.
not only does it show up on film, but now it's backed up by GPS tracking data. So if you got a guy who is feisty, who he's also been very versatile. I know his size, people think slot, but in college he played on the outside as well, so he got some versatility there. And if he's like this insanely like his insane acceleration and insane deceleration compared to like, so typically, just to kind of give you context, some people are really really great at acceleration, can get up to top speed really quickly, but then it takes a long time for them to slow down, right? Or in reverse, some people like don't really have good acceleration, but they decelerate really fast because they don't hit top speed very quickly.
Right.
He's able to do both. And so, as we mentioned in our first episode, I feel like I'm going to be referencing a lot. Like, I love a trump card. I like a skill, like one skill that you're better at than everybody else. Maybe you, like in this case, compared to Jayden Higgins, he doesn't have the size, but he has a trait that is measurable that could be better than anybody else in his class. And that is his ability to like start and stop on a dime and get open. And add that to, I believe he was a captain. I believe like there's all these intangibles, this his physical, his innate ability to be physical, like all these things add up to like someone that I have a draft crush on. I know in the last PFF board he was outside of the top 100, so like I think he could be easily a top 100 player. And there's someone like I just am a big fan of his game, so that's why my second draft crush from the Senior Bowl.
I agree. I think that you and I have had conversations about both of those receivers for Iowa State, and we're
Mhm.
both fans of both of them. The Steve Smith thing, it's hard to get away from. He's a feisty, chippy player. I think it's really interesting how both of those Iowa State Cyclone receivers have that versatility, the alignment versatility to play inside and out. Jaylin Noel also, you see that size and you might worry about the height, right? He's under 5'10,
Mhm.
but he's so dense and compactly built, and he has that burst that you're talking about, like that acceleration. And where that deceleration is so valuable, if you've got the defender worried about taking the top off and they have to respect that, you run that stem full speed vertical at them, right? You just sell them on the
Mhm.
vertical, but you're able to decelerate that quickly. You could create such separation on those comebacks and those hitches that makes it a very dangerous route for you. If your footwork is on time with the rest of your body and you're on schedule with your quarterback, that's one of those anticipatory throws that is a quarterback's best friend, right? Because you can create separation on that route in a way that maybe you don't have to even beat the guy off the line of scrimmage, right? Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's a really interesting thing, and that's a great stat from you to drop that in there. What a support for your claim there.
And, like, I also like that he like, the other thing that made me think about Steve Smith is that he returned kicks and punts, and so if peop old heads remember that he was Steve
Absolutely.
Smith started as a punt returner, and so that's part of the reason, and then just as a contrast to Jayden Higgins, not to say one is better than the other, but when we talk about wasted movement, like, I felt like in the practices and the things that I watched him, I felt like he had 0 wasted movement, so imagine a guy who stops and starts on a dime, who doesn't waste any of his steps, like, I feel like, I don't wanna say attracted, but, like, it is something that I love in a wide receiver if they're able to win with footwork, get separation. If you're tall and you can win, that's also great. So I prefer people who can just get open, but Jalen Noel kind of embodied kind of like the elements of a wide receiver that I really admire.
It gives you the warm and fuzzies, man. That's your draft crush. There ain't nothing wrong with it. You get the butterflies going when Jaylen Noel is sitting there just stopping on a dime, creating separation. I'm with you. He did though. He had very little wasted movement. Probably one of, if not the most impressive footwork and route technician that I saw at the Senior Bowl. So I really like that pick. Should I
Yeah.
get into my
And,
second one now?
sure. And just
No?
just the last thing I did mention, he was a captain. So like these intangibles in terms of playing special teams, being a captain, having that personality and someone that can lead in the locker room. So these are things that we don't typically have access to. So of the things we have access to, and then finally he was awarded like the wide receiver of the week during the Senior Bowl practices week. So like his peers also admire his ability during the Senior Bowl practices.
It's important too. And I'm a fan of the intangibles. So all of that means a lot to me. I mean, I just think that if you're building a locker room, right? I think that
Mhm.
a guy like that is exactly the kind of player that you would like to have in the wide receiver room or in any room of your football locker room. Okay.
All all right. Well, before we get to you, I just wanted to let you know that I picked these guys. I picked Noel specifically because I picked a big guy, I picked a small guy. We could like guys in many different sizes. So before we get to my third one, I just want to let you know, like I have, I have a variety of likes. Um, so second draft crush, Ricky Raines from the Senior Bowl. What do you like?
Well, it's interesting you say that because my first one was a almost 6'4" wide receiver, and my second one is a not even 5'10" cornerback from Kansas State, a young man by the name of Jacob Parrish. Jacob Parrish, I think, is a really good ball player. Now he's going to get pigeonholed a little bit because of his height. Weighed in or measured in at the Senior Bowl at 5'9" and 6'8", right? He was just under 5'10", but the weight, he's 196 pounds. This is a densely built corner, almost 9-inch hands, arm length over 31 inches, and a wingspan of 75. Now, why that's important to me too is because you look at some of the other guys like Dorian Strong. I believe he's about 6'1", 180 pounds out of Virginia Tech. Really nice looking corner and had a good week as well at the Senior Bowl. He was really close to me for being another one of my crushes. But we had to limit it to 3 because Edgar is just a stickler for the rules and he would not let me go any further. So I am held by the rules of Draft Crush. I know that's a lie, isn't it, Edgar?
For the record, you did add one more than three, so
And that's why I'm saying I'm lying. I am bold
it's
faced lying right now on
it's
this
a, it's
show.
a, it's a teaser.
That's right. Jacob Parrish, though, I'm going to say something. Look, you kind of went out on a ledge with your not comp, right? But you said a name that your other draft crush reminded you of, and it was a lofty name. I'm going to do the same here, and I'm not saying that this is who I anticipate this player, Jacob Parrish, turning into. but there are similarities that I can't help when I watch him and I see the size and I see how sticky he is in coverage. And trust me, man, like this guy, he is on your hip. He is able to mirror. He was a track star in high school. Very fast guy. I anticipate him to run a really nice 40 at the combine. Trent McDuffie used to play at Washington. Now he's with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he is one of the best corners in the NFL, in my opinion.
One of my
He
old
weighed in.
students, Ricky.
Is that true?
Trent McDuffie is one of my
Another
old
one?
students, yes.
So
Another
what? Wait
one.
a second. Every single player that I like in the NFL is there because of Edgar. Did you guys know that?
There are some I won't take credit for, but it just so happens that some people that you like happen to have gone to St. John Bosco and Bellflower.
Just phenomenal. Well, Trent McDuffie is one of the best defenders, I think, in the NFL. Where they remind me very much of each other. Versatile, right? I think that what you wanted to do, even when you watch McDuffie coming out, is you wanted to say he's a little bit undersized. He plays a little bit more into his speed instead of the physicality. So how is that going to affect him on the boundary? How's that going to affect him, in the run game and run support? Jacob Parrish reminds me a lot of it. He is not shy with contact. This guy will play through. I'm going to throw some clips up and you can kind of watch how he does with that too. That right there, the rep against Jaylin Royals was one of my favorites. He stayed with him, and then the minute that Jaylin created even the tiniest little bit of separation on the break and he got a tiny window, Parrish uses that length. He does not have short arms. He is a shorter player, but he does not have short arms, and he is really smart about when he uses his hands. He's a physical player. Right there again, he gets that paw right in there, and that is all over his tape at Kansas State as well. His timing and his ability to just stay right on that receiver's hip, the contact in the end zone there you see to jar that ball loose. He plays a very physical brand of football. The click and close reaction that he has once a catch is made, he is able to hit that back foot, get in there, end the play. Really good ball skills. I think that you can see him, that maybe an NFL team does want to move him to nickel. I think he would be an outstanding nickel if that's the case. But he is so comfortable working the boundary and using that to his advantage as well, knowing that he has that and closing off the inside of the field with his physicality. I mean, he has just got some really good instincts, really nice athleticism, big hit there coming across the middle. He can diagnose, he can see what a quarterback is looking at. He has a great instinctual feel for the position, in my opinion. Really comfortable playing up close on press. Is not shy about getting his hands on you off the line of scrimmage, and then has that recovery speed that if you do get past him, he can make up for that and he can compensate. So Jacob Parrish is a guy that I think in the NFL, I don't even look at him as needing to go to a certain kind of system or scheme to reach his fullest potential, because I think he is such a versatile prospect that as long as somebody doesn't tell him he can't do something and doesn't give him the opportunity at the next level, I think he could do anything that you ask him to do.
This is I know like we watch a lot of draft stuff. I haven't watched everything, but these are some of the first times I'm seeing these clips, and wow, this is pretty impressive, Ricky.
He's a really good corner, right? It's just you see that closing speed too. When he is playing off, it's not a problem for him, right? He can give you a little bit of room, but that's not what he wants to do. and you see the change of direction speed and the fluidity in his hips. That's what makes me feel pretty good about his possible transition over to nickel. He doesn't have that boundary closing off, right? That I'd say that he's very smart about using that to his advantage and understanding the leverage that gives him playing that position. But in the slot, in the nickel, you're kind of more on an island, right? You're going to have to be able to turn those hips. You're going to have to be able to mirror, and you're going to have to be able to change directions quickly, because that's what those slot receivers are going to do. And that's what the concepts on offense are trying to do. They're trying to muddy up and confuse that middle of the field to create separation. Jacob Parrish is not a guy that I worry about with that. He is so quick to be able to move his body and turn and get back into position. I just think that this kid has the goods, man. And Trent McDuffie is just the style that I see. You watch him play against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Watch Trent McDuffie play. Very sticky in coverage, uses his length, and is not afraid to mix it up with the physicality. I also think that Jacob Parrish would make a hell of a blitzer. I think that you could send him from that nickel alignment with that closing speed. Boom, right there. That hit on him, that click and close. that's something that's all over his tape, man. And I think that's an NFL trait.
Yeah, and just, like the word that comes to mind when I'm watching these clips is fearless, right? Like he, even if he's behind a step, he doesn't quit when he's blowing up a play, he doesn't quit. So like I see fearlessness in his game, and I like it.
100%, man. That's a great way to put it. So that is my second draft crush from the Senior Bowl. Edgar, let's find out who brings it home for you.
Yeah, so if I had to pick my number, I mean, they all are great, and so this is the one that kind of really stood out to me. Uh, Oluwafemi Oladejo, or as he said, he likes to be called O2 or Femi. Transfer from Cal, UC Berkeley to UCLA. When he was at Cal, for people that know the story, he was an off-ball linebacker. When he went to UCLA, he started as an off-ball linebacker, and then for whatever reason, maybe because of depth, maybe because they want to try something new, they put him at edge in the second half of the season, and he just was so impressive. Weight close to 6'3", 260, almost 10-inch hands. And again, I know we talked about it with Darius Alexander. Just got the NFL size, right? 33, over 33-inch arms and 80-inch wingspan. And so I I'm in some of my evaluations, I'm biased because again, we have favorite teams, and so I'm trying to look for people who would fit a really good, a really
Yeah.
good, a really good fit for your favorite team. Yeah, and so when I look at him, when I look at O2, I see a guy who, like, at the minimum, is really good at stopping the run. Like he has the awareness, he's relentless, he's physical, all those things, right? So he holds up. He has the power and the strength, right? But he also has the movement skills because he used to be an off-ball linebacker, so he could do coverage. He could do, he could move in space. And then there's the intangible. So another award that was given out during the Senior Bowl practices was the Good Guy Award, and based up from his peers and how he interacted with the media, his teammates, or whatever. He won the Good Guy Award at the Senior Bowl. So like, hey, like I'm a good guy. I have respect for other good guys. Ricky's a good guy. So
Eh, up for debate, but the world needs more good guys, so I'm in.
more good guys. And so like I don't really have a comp for him yet. I haven't like figured out where I'd place him. But like when I was looking at some of his all 22 at UCLA, I just see a guy who just does it, like just likes the game and doesn't quit. And so there's one play which we'll show later where the ball is like thrown and it's way down the field. The wide receiver running back is going down the field, and he still goes all the way around from the defensive line position, comes all the way down the field and makes the tackle, right? And so like I feel like every evaluator, every coach is like, yeah, everybody should play like that guy, right? And so it's
Yeah.
one thing to talk about if you're a dog. It's one thing to talk about if you're the type of person that would like that loves the game. And then there's other people where you just watch the film and like, yeah, that guy loves the game. That guy loves it. And
Yep.
so his interviews, his play on the field, and then in the Senior Bowl practices, like he was beating. One that comes to mind is I don't know if it was Monheim or Mannheim, but the center out of USC, Jonah
Yep.
Mannheim,
Yep.
and he's a great center in his own right. And again, asterisks again. Defensive players should have that
Sure.
advantage over offensive linemen, but how they win and what they look like when they win, like speaks to me. And so maybe some people win because they go wider or they multiple moves, like we did with like we talked about Jayden Higgins doing a release with 20 steps or something. I felt like he won by like a quick arm over, by a quick
Yeah.
power, right? And so if you could win quickly like that against really good competition, like that speaks to me. And so some people saw him and said like, oh, I got to watch more of his film. And then just between the size, the movements, the relentlessness, the off the field intangibles in terms of like loving the game and being someone that players like to play with, like it just speaks to me as someone who should be drafted higher than where he's currently projected.
There's a theme that's happening here that almost all of our players are guys that you could make an argument should have some sort of chip on their shoulder, right?
Hmm,
That play with
yeah.
a tiny bit of an edge and not necessarily an internal edge, right?
Mhm,
But just maybe that they're not regarded in the same manner as their peers. Now, whether
mhm,
that's because of the school, whether it's because of the physical build of the player, or maybe just not the overall production that some of the other big names have. But these guys, at least from my evaluation standpoint, they play like they belong in the same conversation as those other names. And
mhm,
that is something that I look for with a player is does he play like he belongs? Right. And there's no
mhm,
real quantifiable way to say that. It's kind of just
mhm.
a subjective, like, does that look like a guy that is gonna play on Sundays? right? And
Mhm.
there is just that like naked eye ability to look at a guy play and say, man, he just does a lot of things that I see NFL players do. Like there's just a lot
Mhm.
of movement in the ability, the athleticism, but also the intuitiveness, the awareness. And I think that that's a great example with O2 because you bring up the positional change where he started to where he is. He learned the responsibilities of a different position, right?
Mhm.
And those responsibilities are they're not tethered, but they're associated to what he's doing
Mhm.
now. He knows that it's a complementary piece of his puzzle. That's a really good pick, man. So is there a particular system or anything on the defensive side of the ball that you think he thrives in at the next level?
It's I hate to, like, pigeonhole somebody, but if we have to just pick, like,
Sure.
on first glance, like, if he's in a 3-4 linebacker outside linebacker role where he has to rush the passer, stop the run, and potentially drop into coverage, like, I think that's something that's in his experience toolkit.
Okay.
Some people have only rushed, and then you're asking them to do coverage. Some people have only been coverage, and then you're asking them to do more rushing the passer. He's one of the few prospects that can say, like, "Oh, I've done both." And one thing that's great is that we've seen these flashes from him. I believe he had like double-digit tackles for loss last year. This is somebody who's still learning how to play this position, and so if he's already this good without the training and the coaching, like maybe we're just scratching the surface of what he could potentially be.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So comfortable with him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. Um, and then I think that you're talking about it though that he still has the ability that if he ends up at a different team, I think he could still produce and play as a two hand down end in a 4-3. I think that he has that
Mhm.
ability, the length and the weight that he has, his size that plays part in that versatility. So really good pick, Edgar. I like your draft crushes, man.
Oh, you know what, Ricky? I like your draft crushes.
Look at us. Just see, I am a nice guy. We are nice guys. Listen
Oh,
to
yeah,
us.
that's right. That's right. That's right. O2 would be proud.
He would. Yeah, we're doing it for you. Oh. All right. Let's see. I'll round this out for mine.
Let's do
Um,
it.
I got an edge defender as well. And I got a guy who's got some size limitations in people's minds. I got a guy that has competition level questions in everyone's mind. But I'll tell you one person that doesn't have questions about his ability. David Walker himself, the edge defender out of Central Arkansas. Wildly productive. I believe he had 16 sacks this past season. Um, he's had, I want to say maybe 9 the season before that. I would have to look. I don't have my stats sitting right in front of me. But this is a productive guy. This is a disruptive edge player. You watch his film of his time at Central Arkansas, he's a bully. I mean, he is pushing offensive tackles directly back into their quarterback. He is putting them on their behinds, right? He's sitting them down for a talking, right? And that's what I look for. I love a power rush from an edge defender. It is what draws me initially, even more so than the speed. The speed is really flashy and it's impressive and uses a ton of athleticism to be able to execute certain moves of a pass rush arsenal that not everybody can. So I understand why you're drawn to that normally. But for me, seeing a guy being able to convert that speed to power rush, getting off on the line of scrimmage, and then getting those hands at the right placement, right time to be able to just push back that offensive tackle and having the strength, having that lower body strength and the movement to be able to kind of bend those hips to push back. I absolutely am drawn to it. And David Walker, his tape has it littered all over. So when he went to the Senior Bowl, Edgar, I was looking, does that power translate against these power 4 conference offensive tackles, right? And if it doesn't, does he have the secondary? Does he have the speed and the quickness to get around some of these guys? And I'm telling you what, from what I saw, the power 100% translated. He was pushing back some of the bigger guys. I know the right tackle from Minnesota, um, Ursary, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Yep. Yep.
Um, is it Ursary?
That's what I've heard. Don't quote
Okay.
me, but that's what
I
I've heard.
I typically try to go back and like listen to a broadcast of a game so that I can find out how they're saying it, and I didn't do it before this episode, so I apologize.
You good?
But that was one of the better offensive tackles I thought that I saw that week. He had some good reps against some other guys, and I saw David Walker was able to push him backwards. And that's a 6'5", 6'6", 335-pound guy that played at Minnesota. So the question of level of competition, you watch these clips. I mean, he is speed to power, but he also has that power to speed ability. He can make just a pure speed right there. You got a little dip right there, that shoulder dip and rip. He's got that ability. The bull rush he uses a lot. He's got that swim move, the over on the up and over of it. I mean, he fights through an offensive tackle's face. That is what he does, and that's really important when you talk about setting the edge. That's going to be a question that he has at the next level. I don't think that you look at him as a 3-down player, at least not right away. But when he measured in at just over 6 foot. He was listed at 6 foot, 260 pounds, and he weighed in at 267 pounds. A guy that has that build of like this dense, compact, powerful build, but can also move the way that he does. I was struggling to find a comp, and I still don't have a comp, right? And this isn't a direct thing, but the player that he reminds me of a little bit with just being such a bully and being this relentless, like aggressive pass rusher. I don't know if you'll remember this guy. I bet you will, Edgar. Cameron Wake, that used to play for the Dolphins, reminds me a lot of him. And now Cameron Wake's story, he was undrafted. I believe he played in like the Canadian Football League for a couple of years. Finally got an opportunity to come back to the NFL. And instead of playing outside linebacker, they used him as a down defensive end. Ended up standing up a little bit more in his career later on down the way. But they didn't ask him to do all those responsibilities. They said, hey, look, man, you are a terror getting after the quarterback. That is what you do, and you do it well. And he ended up racking double-digit sacks for a few years. He was in the conversation of defensive MVP one season with the Miami Dolphins. You don't always have to have, like we talked about, right? You don't have to be a jack of all trades. But if you're a master of one, and I'm going to tell you my opinion on David Walker is that he's becoming a master of a pass rusher. And I don't care about the competition he played against. This is a violent, powerful dude who seems like he knows how to get after the quarterback.
He's impressive. When I first watched him, the first thing I thought of was power, just pure power. And I think part of the reason why, well, first of all, I know he has a lower competition, but he did prove in the Senior Bowl he belonged, is that because he's so low to the ground and he's so powerful, like if you're a tall guy like Ursary, if you're a
That's right.
tall guy like some of the other top players in this draft class, like how do you you're 6'5", 6'6", and you're trying to block out at 6 feet tall that's super powerful, that's like I don't know, a bowling ball for lack of a better word. Like how do you block that? And so I just came away really impressed by his power. Um, One thing that our listeners or our watchers may be interested to know is that he actually made Bruce Feldman's freaks list. For those who aren't familiar, he
That's right.
writes for Athletic and documents. Last I heard was like 100, but he tries to document the freakiest athletes of the college football players of each season. And he made a list for having a 36-inch vertical and running a 4.59 40-yard dash. And so this is I like freaky athletes. Yeah, you picked one, Ricky, and I just love seeing him on tape, the way that he wins, which we talked about with Jaylen Noel, like because he has a trump card, because he has at least something that he excels in. It gives me hope that he could translate to the next level.
That's right. And you just wanted to see it. The Senior Bowl gave it that opportunity to see, does it translate, at least in the one-on-ones, right, with the bigger names and the guys that played at the bigger schools. And for my money, it absolutely did. Did he win every single rep? No. He had a rep. We showed it on the video. He had a rep that he got, stonewalled. But that's going to happen. That happens to everybody. It happens to Myles Garrett. Not often, but it happens. And so, yeah, this guy is a guy that you take those freaky traits, man, but then you match it with the production, and he's got a pass rush plan. That's the other thing, is that when you're such a dominant physical presence and as powerful as he was at that level of competition, you wonder, does he have a plan, though? And so I've got it paused here on this clip because you watch here, this right tackle on this play, he tries to do a fast set, right? Because he wants to be able to square himself up for that power rush. He wants to be able to absorb that contact. And David Walker knows he's going to do it. And he counters him real quickly. Ooh, gone. He tried to jump set to the outside so that he could withstand that power rush. And instead, David Walker made him pay. And he got inside real quick and beat him with his speed. And I just think that if you don't have an answer for a plethora of moves, I think David Walker's going to make you look silly. And I think he does that on Sundays, not just, on Saturdays in lower competition.
I could see him like to start his NFL career to be a DPR, a
Yep.
pass rush specialist. Um, just to start. I mean, obviously he there's some things that he could be improved upon, like you mentioned, Ricky. But like just to start, just to put him on third downs or obvious passing plays, and just let him feast. Like at least he has something he can contribute right away, which is for not all players in the class, you could say like they could do something right away day one. I think on day one he could be a pass rush specialist.
Well, and the good thing is that if you're not investing day one draft capital, right? If you're not taking a top 15 pick and selecting this guy, you're not upset about getting a day one DPR, right? Like
Mhm,
if you're talking about just a rotational pass rusher, why is that a problem? Like if you can get that in the early third to the fourth or fifth round, which is probably his current projections, I would be comfortable taking a flyer on him in the bottom of the second, even to the early third. I think I'm probably
mhm,
much higher on him than many people would be. Um, but I just think that if you're getting a player in that position, how could you be upset if he's terrific at one thing and you only ask him to get after the passer? When in the NFL, man, passing is king right now. I know that they've gotten back
mhm,
a little bit to running the ball, but these quarterbacks are still what make it all click, right? They're what make it all
mhm,
turn. So if you can make a quarterback uncomfortable, we watched Tom Brady for decades just terrorize the league because he was comfortable back
mhm,
there. And then the scouting report always came out. Hey, how do you beat Tom Brady? How do you beat Pat Mahomes? Make him uncomfortable. Don't give him the
mhm.
time, right? So I think if you're trying to make a quarterback uncomfortable, David Walker could help you do it.
By the way, you spoke about production. These stats kind of blew my mind. In his last 3 seasons, he recorded 151 pressures and 37 sacks in his career at Central Arkansas. So, you know,
Bananas. Bananas.
bananas.
So if you want and look, he's on the freaks list, which there are some other players. Joshua Farmer was a guy that I was extremely high on Joshua Farmer last year when I thought that he may declare and come out. Watched him again this year. It was really hard for me to leave him off, but David Walker has kind of stolen that position for me. But Joshua Farmer's another guy that I think was on that freaks list. We didn't talk about the Shrine Bowl guys, but there were some other guys. I want to say one name out loud just because he's a Maryland Terrapin and I am a Terp fan. Jordan Phillips, the interior defensive lineman, also on the Feldman freaks list. All of those guys, it's really fun to look at them with their athleticism, but David Walker is the one that matches that with the production. I don't really mind the level of competition when you see how dominant he was at that level.
So those are our 6 draft crushes. Ricky, before we jump into our extra bonus here,
Yeah.
I think you already started. So just to put you on the spot and something unscripted, maybe you could, without having to say so much about it, do you want to run down any other names that just didn't make the cut, just honorable mentions, other ones that you just didn't get to chat about, but like you still have a draft crush on?
Yeah, a lot of them. I thought that there was,
Just
I
read
thought
this.
there really,
Just read the roster.
yeah, basically, if you could just read off, the national and the American teams, you would know who my crushes were. Um, I'm gonna have a great hit rate because they're all gonna be my crushes. So, no, but in all honesty, man, Walter Nolan, I thought had an outstanding week. He's a guy that I think can just vault up draft boards. I think that this week probably started that process for him. You could see him, I think, ranked as high as top 10 on some people's boards, all the way down to maybe, mid second or early day 2 grade, mainly because of his size. He's a little bit undersized for that defensive interior, but man, this guy packs a wallop in those hands. He has speed. He's got a arsenal of moves. He's a great run defender. Um, I think his running mate Princely, the edge rusher out of Ole Miss, also I think is
Mm,
a really intriguing prospect. There was
me
somebody
too.
else, man, that what was it?
Me too. As I say, I
Oh, Princely
echo
was
your
your guy too.
princely. Yeah.
Keep you say some so that I could keep thinking because now I'm running on E
Yeah.
here.
For me, I liked, the tight end really showed out. I know some people
Oh
liked
yeah,
Mason Taylor. I was partial to Elijah Arroyo. I
great week.
liked, let's see, just going down the corners. I liked Mac McWilliams. He was a guy that I thought flashed as well.
And Mac's
I
another
heard.
guy that's a little bit undersized, kind of similar to Jacob Parrish. And he's the same size as Jacob Parrish, and I believe he has like a inch and a half shorter arms or something like that too. So that was an interesting comparison for me when I looked at those two.
Mhm. And then from the linebacker position, I heard a lot of like intangible stuff about Jeffrey Bossa in terms of like leadership ability, quality traits, right? Like being able to like direct people, lead, kind of a green dot type person as a linebacker, I thought was pretty interesting. I also liked Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart. Obviously,
Donovan
is some of this.
Ezeuroku.
So that's the one that was probably my favorite that I left off.
Me
My
too.
most honorable mention. He's a guy, and he's a little bit undersized in a sense, but man, his production is so good. His tape is so good. So those are
And
probably
he's
like the few
undersized,
guys.
and he's undersized depending on what you're like asking him to do, though, right? But he's got that
Mhm.
freaky length
Yep,
to make up
he has the
for it.
arms.
His arms are crazy. He measured in at almost 83-inch arms at 6'2",
Mhm.
248 pounds. Or 82-inch wingspan, not 82-inch arms. That would be redonkulous. I believe it was about 34 and a half inch arms, I think, with
Mhm.
a almost 83-inch wingspan. And really that is a incredible measurement for him. He's another guy that just has a full bag, right? Like that dude
Mhm.
has all the tools in the world. He's a good run defender, I think. Has the
Mhm.
strength to hold up at the point of attack. That 248 was maybe a little bit light
Mhm.
for the position, but also, when these guys get in the NFL, you can anticipate, especially if they have the longer length like that, they have the frame to kind of fill out a little bit.
Mhm.
They're probably going to
Mhm.
add some muscle to that frame.
Yeah.
So that doesn't bother me at all. But I thought that he had a outstanding week. And then the
Yes. So he
running
was my
backs,
most. He was my
running backs
fourth
are
place.
hard to evaluate.
You go ahead, Ricky.
Running backs are tough to evaluate in an all-star setting like that, right? So I didn't really
Mhm.
get to see much that I could make an opinion on with those guys, but I thought RJ Harvey looked pretty good.
Mhm.
He's a player I like. Brashard Smith out of SMU, I also liked a good deal. Sorry, I kept cutting you off.
No, you're good. I just want to say, like, I also liked Ezer Ezeruaku's his toolkit. Like he comes at like you talked about rush plans. I just love how he has different ways he wins. I feel like that's a skill that is often overlooked. Is like how many ways can you win, or what do you already know? And then for the running backs, I there's only two things I really look at because you mentioned it's kind of hard to evaluate in this kind of setting, and so I like to see which running backs have pass catching ability and which ones can protect, like for a blitz or for whatever reason they need to block. So I feel like those two
Yep.
drills I really enjoy. I like Brashard Smith in terms of his pass catching ability, and then blocking. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a guy named maybe LaQuint Allen. I thought like some of his reps were pretty cool in terms of blocking,
Yep.
but those are people I would say Ezuraku, Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, those types. Mac McWilliams were like people who just missed the list.
I'd agree. And we didn't even bring up much of the offensive line, but there were some really good offensive linemen. Gray Zabel was a guy that's on everybody's winners list. I think that
Yes.
he probably, and I think he was recognized as the best offensive lineman as well from the peers. He probably had the best week. I thought the Wyatt Willem, a guy that on our first mock draft, I was a little bit higher on as well, and,
Mhm.
and put him in the first round. Thought he had a nice week. Defensive line, there was one other guy that I wanted to talk about, Jamari Caldwell, because he's one of the
Oh
few like
yes.
true nose tackles. And I thought that he had a really nice week for himself. This is a guy that's 6'2", 342 pounds, and he's a true nose, right? He's got like the 32, a little sub 33-inch arms, 77-inch
Mhm.
wingspan. Like he is a little bit more of that stout, compact build. But man, this
Mhm.
guy's got some get off of the line of scrimmage and just brute strength. Deion Walker probably stole the show as far as large individuals moving and
Mhm.
playing well, but Jamari Caldwell stood out a lot to me as well.
I gotta find. Maybe I'll pop it up in the later on. But like, I remember looking at that Zebra Technologies, their reports, and Caldwell had like the highest acceleration of defensive lineman, but it wasn't even
Yeah,
like he was just like he
yeah,
was way high. Like so, generally, like you're ranking who's first and second, but like the margin of error, kind of like the 40-yard dash, like the margin is like hundredths of a second. So like, I don't fault somebody if they're not the highest, but in terms of
right.
acceleration for defensive linemen, like he was way higher than everybody else in acceleration, and that caught my eye.
Yeah, that's a Vince Wilfork esque type of get
Mm,
off right there. You remember
mm,
Vince was such a large dude, but the way that he could get after you quickly, man, it was
mm.
terrifying. Like just absolutely terrifying to see a guy that large being able to move that fast, man.
Yes. Other guys I forgot to mention, like Kyle Williams, wide receiver out of Washington
Yeah,
State.
Washington State. I liked him too.
Tez Johnson, who I really liked. I know people were down on him because he weighed in like 150-ish pounds, but
Hmm.
he was like wide open on every. I mean, obviously, again, advantage for wide receivers, but it felt like he was open on
Right.
every play. And then Jack Besh obviously was a story. I feel like
Yes.
I shied away from people who already got so much press. So
Right.
guys like Gray Zabel and Jack
Yep.
Besh like really stood out, but like they got so much love that like not to say that they're not a draft crush,
Right.
but I know they already got a lot of love from draft analysts and in the community.
I agree with that. One last
But
name
there's
I'll
no.
put out for the wide receivers as well, and
Mhm,
Crib by all. I'll be transparent here. Ty Felton, out of
mhm,
Maryland. I thought that he had a nice week. That's a guy that if you're looking for a yak contributor for your wide receiver room, I think that he brings it. And he had some nice hand catches as well.
mhm.
He's going to be interesting to see where he goes. And with that segue, Edgar, you just talked about the guys that got all the love, right, from the draft
Yes.
analysts.
Mhm,
One guy that we did not put on, and I thought, hey, let's just touch on him real quick before we wrap this up.
mhm,
Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. Before he got to the Senior Bowl, there was Shrine Bowl measurements, right? That came
mhm,
out, or measurements pre. I think it was Shrine Bowl, and I don't know why he even had Shrine Bowl measurements.
mhm,
Um, but it came out that he was 6'4", 237 pounds. And so there was a whole lot of people freaking out about that, right? Because
mhm,
237 is light, Edgar, for an edge
mhm.
defender. Like that's very small.
Right, right.
Then he comes to the Senior Bowl and he weighs in and he measures 6'3" and 1/8 and 251 pounds. Now he had the sub 33 arms, 32 and a quarter inch arms, and
Mhm,
sub 78-inch wingspan, 77 and a quarter. Smaller hands, just over 8.5-inch hands. But this guy had a pretty solid week, Edgar. Did you see anything from Mike that just kind of said, all right, maybe I'm too low on him, maybe I'm too high on him, or maybe this guy is the truth?
I think that was the highlight of the Senior Bowl, that one
Josh
clip that we just
Connerly,
played. Josh
mm-hmm,
Connerly, highly touted
right here.
offensive tackle. For
Mm,
context, he usually plays left tackle, right? So
right.
this is not his
Yep.
usual position. He did like a
Quick
quick
jump set.
set type of
Yep.
quick jump set type block, which is not
Yep.
good for anybody, let alone someone like Mike Green. And so I don't know, like I like him a lot. There's a lot of polarization around Mike Green. So like there's a lot of love to, like maybe he's a top 10 pick. So then the love has gotten like now the hate has come because the love has gone too far. I mean, just in terms of production and analytics, like he is off the charts in terms of pass rush win rate, in terms of run stop, in terms of run defense, all those analytic data that you try to measure how well an edge defender performs. Like he is like in the 99th percentile in a lot of those. And so
Mm-hmm.
he is really good. Again, he plays at Marshall, so level competitions. But again, at the Senior Bowl, as you saw some of the clips here, like he obviously was very impressive enough that he walked away in the middle of the practices to
Yeah.
he made his money, went home. So I think he's a very good player. I wouldn't mind if my favorite team drafted him, but again, there's a lot of questions about his size and his length that are not ideal when it comes to NFL thresholds.
What shows up when I watch him with the length issue is more in point of attack and run support than it is anything else. He's so fast and he does have a nice pass rush plan too. That
Mhm,
as a rusher, I don't have any concerns with his size or his strength or anything like that. But I got
mhm,
a one clip dialed up here and you can see he's standing in this play. He's upright, not hands in the dirt. I've got the circle that's going to go over him.
mhm,
But you watch what happens a lot of times when he's doing or when he's playing run support or trying to set the edge. He's pretty up high. His leverage isn't terrific. He doesn't start from a very low place because he doesn't have the arms to extend out, right? So
mhm,
he tries to get skinny a lot. And he
mhm,
tries to get inside and he tries to hold up that way. But what that does is it allows an offensive tackle to place their hands underneath you. And if you can get those hands underneath, right, you can
mhm,
move a defender as an offensive tackle, as an offensive lineman. That's what it's all about, is getting your hands in the right time, in the right place. And on this clip, I'll just show you what happens when an offensive lineman is able to get his hands and Mike goes a little bit high. The offensive lineman, now this is an offensive lineman, I believe, for Louisiana Monroe, a decent sized guy, 6'6", 290 pounds. But this is what happens at that level of competition when he kind of plays with that typical leverage that he plays with. Just run the
Mhm.
clip. You circle him there. He comes up high. He gets the hands on him and he moves him. I mean, he just
Mhm.
moves him directly out of the picture, right? That goes
Mhm.
for an 80-yard touchdown. Now, I'm not saying that that is the only thing that Mike can do against the run because he can't. He's actually really good. He's got some really nice reps playing
Mhm.
run support, and he's so disruptive, man. He gets in that backfield. But the questions that you still have about Mike Green, if you had him coming into him, I don't necessarily know that mine were answered just because of him running over Josh Connerly. I thought it was an impressive rep. I think it's absolutely worth talking about this guy as a premier draft prospect. And I don't want this to sound like I'm low on him because I'm not. Right now,
Mhm.
currently, I think that he's my edge 3 or 4.
Mhm.
And so like he's not low on my list. But from an objective standpoint, there are certain things that you see with him that you wonder about at the NFL level. I kind of wish he'd have played in the game just to see what he would have done. Um,
Mhm.
those one-on-ones, right? When you have the offensive lineman in an island, there's not even like there's no friendly fire. So you're not worried about someone else bumping into you. You're not worried about getting combo blocked. It's pretty easy, man, to take advantage of that one-on-one opportunity, in my opinion. If you're
Mhm.
smart and you have a good pass rush, you're going to be able to win that more times than not. But when other
Mhm.
people are in that same window and there's a lot of traffic, you can get bumped, you can get moved. How do you react to that? And that's kind of what I wanted to see more. I was really looking forward to seeing him in a game setting.
But I think you've encapsulated everything that I would have wanted to say. I mean, we talked about toolkits. Like he has a lot of ways in which he wins in his pass rush, and so I appreciate that. It's not just the same move or just I'm just going to run straight at you or whatever. Like he has a lot of different tools that he uses to get to the quarterback, and so I think he could win. I think he could be successful. It's hard for me to to say like, oh, this guy should be a top 10 pick if he's worthy. That's a debate to be had throughout this whole draft season.
Right.
But I'm just like, I mean, just as a fan of football, like I just love watching him play football.
Absolutely. He's a dynamic pass rusher. And I think that anyone who tries to say that he's not an NFL player, I think you're looking for a reason to be negative. That the
Mhm.
guy's an NFL player. He's got an NFL skill set. He can rush the passer. The question is, how much will a team fall in love with him?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But hey, only takes one team to find their draft crush, and he can fly off that board.
Absolutely. So that's it for this episode of our draft crushes from the Senior Bowl. You know, if you haven't already, if you want to like this video, you want to subscribe. If you have someone that we didn't mention or someone we didn't mention enough or mentioned too much, please leave it below so we could we can respond, we can comment and see how this is like community. We are open to different ideas and topics. So if there's something you thought of and you say, hey man, you missed out, put it in the comments and be happy to respond. Ricky, any last words?
No, that's it. I would love to hear other people's draft crush. So as Edgar said, drop a draft crush in the comments. If we touched on them, tell us if we did them, justice by talking about them, or if you had something that you liked about them that we didn't say enough and we weren't, lovey dovey enough about them. Tell me, man. I could be nicer. Like I'm still a work in progress. Edgar's got the goods. I'm still figuring out this whole good guy thing. So give me some help.
All right. So then, until next time, that's Ricky Raines. I'm Edgar Salmingo. See you for the next episode.